The Volthar, with their 6 limbs and chitinous exoskeletons, stood in formation as the new human workers disembarked from the orbital shuttle. Their dark eyes, adapted to the dim volcanic glow of their homeworld, watched the humans with a mixture of curiosity and skepticism. The humans walked slowly across the landing bay, stretching their limbs after the long journey. They were fresh recruits, barely acclimated to Volthar's harsh gravity. Earth, though classified as a death world due to its aggressive wildlife, had only about 70% of Volthar's gravitational pull. These humans would have a hard time at first, but the Volthar had seen this before. In time, they would adapt perhaps faster than anyone expected. Sect, the Volthar overseer, clicked its mandibles thoughtfully. Humans. They never look like much at first, but give them a few months on Volthar, and they'll be running circles around our kind besides Sect. Its colleague Trick made a low, humming sound, the Volthar equivalent of a chuckle. Yes, but they break so easily. How long before the first one cracks under the strain? I give it 2 weeks. Sect's multifaceted eyes tracked the new arrivals. They had no exoskeleton, no natural armor, and yet they had something else, something less tangible but just as effective. The adaptability of the human body, combined with their stubborn will to survive, made them formidable workers. Volthar was the 4th planet from its sun, a rocky, molten world with lava plains and sulfurous winds. It wasn't a place for the faint-hearted, and yet here humans were, willing to work in some of the most dangerous conditions in the galaxy. Their ability to withstand extremes of heat, cold, and gravity had made them the perfect candidates for mining operations. The Volthar, though physically superior in some ways, had their limits, especially in the planet's superheated equatorial zone. The humans, on the other hand, could function in these conditions with only minor enhancements. Their adaptability was their greatest strength. Sect had seen it before. New recruits would arrive, weak and frail compared to the hardened Volthar miners. But within months, their muscles would strengthen, their bones would harden, and they would move as though they were born to this world. Sect tapped a panel with one of its lower arms and opened a communication channel. Welcome to Volthar. I am Overseer Sect. You are now employees of the Interstellar Mining Coalition. We expect discipline, hard work, and efficiency. In return, you will be well compensated. Your survival is in your hands. The translator rendered Sect's speech into the various human languages with a precise mechanical tone. The humans, wearing heavy gear to compensate for the planet's gravity and atmosphere, seemed unfazed. One of them, a tall man with broad shoulders, stepped forward. "I'm Jackson," he said, with a grin that seemed entirely inappropriate for the situation. "We're ready to get to work." Sect tilted its head, observing Jackson. "We will see." The next morning, the new human workers were gathered at the mining facility, a massive structure built into the side of a dormant volcano. They were given their assignments, safety gear, and orientation packets. Jackson, the unofficial leader of the human group, was quick to adapt. He had a way of motivating his fellow humans, pushing them beyond their initial discomfort. "Come on, people. We didn't sign up to lounge around. This gravity's not going to beat us." The humans grumbled, but they followed his lead. Every step felt like dragging a boulder through wet sand, but they moved forward. Over time, they learned to conserve energy, to pace themselves, and most importantly, to stay hydrated in the dry, sulfur-laden air. Volthar's mining operation was both high-tech and brutal. Automated drills tore into the planet's surface, extracting valuable minerals, but much of the work required hands-on labor. The humans were assigned to work in shifts, operating machinery, maintaining equipment, and transporting raw ore. The first week was grueling. The humans worked long hours, their bodies struggling to adjust to the gravity. They sweated under the weight of their suits, their muscles aching. A few of them fell ill, unable to keep up with the pace, but they didn't quit. Sect observed them from a distance, impressed despite itself. "They are more resilient than I expected," it admitted to Trick. "Resilient, yes," Trick replied. "But for how long? This planet will break them." Eventually, Sect wasn't so sure. By the end of the second month, the humans had begun to thrive. Their bodies, once weak and sluggish under the planet's gravity, had become strong. Their movements were still slower than the Volthar, but they had endurance. Where Volthar miners would tire and require rest, the humans kept going, fueled by some inner drive that the Volthar couldn't quite understand. It was during one particularly brutal workday, deep in the mines, that Sect saw something that solidified its respect for the humans. A tunnel had collapsed, trapping several workers beneath tons of rock. The Volthar miners, though strong, struggled to lift the debris. Time was running out. Then Jackson and his team arrived. Without hesitation, they threw themselves into the rescue effort, leveraging their equipment and their sheer strength to move the rocks. Their muscles strained and sweat poured down their faces, but they didn't stop. One by one, they pulled their comrades from the wreckage, working with a grim determination that bordered on madness. Sect watched in stunned silence as the last worker was pulled free. Jackson, covered in dust and grime, grinned up at the overseer. "Told you we'd be fine." Sect could only click its mandibles in agreement. "You are." Unpredictable human. By the time the humans had been on Volthar for 6 months, they were fully integrated into the workforce. They had developed their own routines, their own way of doing things. They shared stories with the Volthar, taught them strange human games, and even introduced them to human cuisine, much to the Volthar's initial horror. One evening, after a long shift, Jackson and Sect stood outside the mining facility, watching the twin moons of Volthar rise over the horizon. The air was thick with volcanic ash, but the view was strangely beautiful. "You ever think about visiting Earth?" Jackson asked, leaning against a rock. "It's got its problems, but there's nothing quite like home." Sect considered this. "Perhaps one day, though I suspect I would not find your gravity to my liking." Jackson laughed. "You'd get used to it." Sect made a thoughtful sound. "Perhaps. Just as you have gotten used to ours." Jackson stretched, his body strong and resilient from months of labor. "That's the thing about humans," he said with a wink. "We adapt." Sect watched as Jackson and the other humans returned to their barracks, their laughter and camaraderie filling the air. It clicked its mandibles once more, a sign of quiet approval. Humans were indeed a strange species, fragile, yet unbreakable. And though they had come to Volthar as workers, Sect now saw them as something more. Weeks passed, and the humans continued to outperform even the most optimistic expectations. Jackson had become more than just a worker, he was a natural leader. And his team's results reflected that. They dug deeper, worked longer, and found ways to improve efficiency. The Volthar overseers began to notice that areas where the humans worked were seeing record outputs. Sect had been tracking the data, and the numbers spoke for themselves. Jackson's crew and others like it were becoming the backbone of the mining operation. However, not all Volthar were happy about this development. One evening, as Sect reviewed the latest reports, it received a message from Volthar's high command. A meeting was scheduled with the Overseer Council to discuss labor relations and long-term sustainability. When Sect arrived at the council chamber the next day, the atmosphere was tense. Volthar leadership, composed of high-ranking officials and powerful mining executives, sat in a semicircle around the central podium. Sect took its place, sensing that something significant was about to unfold. High Overseer Kal, a towering Volthar known for its rigid adherence to tradition, clicked its mandibles sharply as the meeting began. "The humans have been Impressive, Kahl admitted, though the words were laced with caution. But they are unpredictable. Their culture is chaotic, their habits strange. We must be cautious about becoming too reliant on their labor. The sect had expected this. There had always been some resentment toward the humans, especially among the older, more traditional Volthar. But the facts were indisputable. Their output is nearly double that of our own workers in the same conditions. Sect responded calmly. They have adapted faster than we anticipated, and their resilience has proven invaluable. Kahl's eyes narrowed. Yes, and that is precisely why we should be concerned. They are changing the dynamics of our workforce. Volthar workers feel displaced, less valued. We cannot afford unrest. Trick, who sat to the side, added, "There have already been murmurs of dissatisfaction in the lower ranks. Some are suggesting that we begin phasing out human workers, or at least limiting their influence." Sect felt a wave of frustration building. Limiting their influence? They're not here to influence, they're here to work. And they've done that better than anyone expected. We brought them here to do the jobs we cannot. If we phase them out, we risk losing the progress we've made. A younger Volthar, a mining executive, chimed in. What if we're training them to surpass us? What if one day they realize they don't need us at all? Sect hesitated for a moment, choosing its next words carefully. They are not here to replace us. They are here to complement our strengths. We control the operations, the technology, the resources. The humans are workers, yes, but they have no interest in running our world. The room fell silent for a moment. Kahl's mandibles twitched as it considered the argument. "Perhaps you are correct," it said slowly. "But we must proceed with caution. The humans are capable of great adaptation, but that also makes them unpredictable. Keep them under close observation. Sect. Ensure that they remain loyal to our cause." Sect nodded, but inside it couldn't help but feel that this was the wrong approach. The humans had proven their loyalty time and time again. Why was it so difficult for the Volthar leadership to trust them? The following weeks were marked by tension among the workforce. The Volthar miners, who had once been indifferent to the humans, began to view them with suspicion. Rumors circulated that the humans were planning to demand more rights, or worse, take control of the mining operations altogether. Jackson and his crew sensed the shift. The usual camaraderie they shared with the Volthar workers had begun to fray at the edges. Jackson noticed that some of the Volthar had stopped engaging with them entirely, keeping their distance in the mess halls and on the job sites. One evening, as Jackson sat with his crew outside the barracks, drinking a cold beverage and trying to unwind after a long shift, Fred, one of his crew members, spoke up. "You feel it, don't you?" he asked quietly. "Feel what?" Jackson replied, though he knew exactly what Fred meant. The tension. The Volthar are acting weird. They're pulling back, keeping us at arm's length. Jackson leaned back in his chair, staring up at the twin moons of Volthar as they cast their pale light over the landscape. "Yeah, I've noticed. But what can we do? We're just here to work." "It's not like we're asking for anything crazy," Fred sighed. "Maybe that's the problem. We're doing too well. They didn't expect us to be this good at it." Jackson frowned. "You think they're afraid of us?" Fred nodded. "Why else would they be acting like this?" Jackson took a long drink from his bottle, thinking, "Well, we'll just have to prove them wrong. Show them we're not here to take over. We're here to help." Fred chuckled. "Yeah, good luck with that." The following week, tensions reached a boiling point. Jackson and his crew were working deep in the mines, further than any Volthar had gone before. The air was thick with sulfur, and the heat from the planet's molten core was almost unbearable. But the humans pushed on, their bodies now fully accustomed to the harsh conditions. Then, disaster struck. One of the main support beams in the tunnel gave way, sending a cascade of rocks and debris crashing down. Alarms blared, and the mining crew scrambled to escape. Jackson's team worked frantically to stabilize the structure, but it was no use. The tunnel was collapsing. Several Volthar miners were trapped under the debris, their limbs pinned by heavy rocks. The Volthar overseers, who had always prided themselves on their strength, struggled to free their comrades. That's when Jackson and his crew stepped in. Without hesitation, they rushed into the danger zone, using their reinforced suits and sheer determination to lift the debris. The Volthar watched in stunned silence as the humans, despite their smaller size and lack of natural armor, managed to free the trapped miners. Jackson gritted his teeth as he lifted a particularly heavy boulder, his muscles straining under the weight. "Come on. We need to get them out before the whole thing comes down." His crew worked with a precision that only months of experience in Volthar's gravity could provide. Within minutes, they had freed all the trapped miners and evacuated the tunnel. Sect arrived just as the last miner was pulled to safety. The overseer watched as Jackson, covered in dust and sweat, gave a tired but triumphant nod. "We're clear," Jackson said, his voice hoarse from the effort. Sect approached him, its multifaceted eyes reflecting the dim light of the tunnel. "You saved them," Sect said, its voice carrying a note of surprise. Jackson wiped his brow and shrugged. "We're all in this together, right?" Sect stared at him for a long moment before finally responding, "Yes, we are." The incident in the mines marked a turning point. Word spread quickly about how the humans had risked their lives to save the Volthar miners. The skepticism and suspicion that had been growing began to dissipate, replaced by a newfound respect for the human workers. They weren't just outsiders anymore, they were part of the team. Jackson's crew became something of a legend among the miners. Even the most skeptical Volthar began to acknowledge the value of having humans on their side. The humans, for their part, continued to work just as hard, if not harder, than before. They had proven themselves, not through words, but through actions. Sect, who had always believed in the humans' potential, found itself at the center of a new initiative. High Command had approved a proposal to integrate more human workers into key mining positions. It was clear now that the humans weren't just a temporary solution, they were essential to Volthar's future. One evening, as Jackson and Sect stood outside the facility, watching the twin moons rise once again, Sect broke the silence. "You've changed things, Jackson." Jackson smirked. "We didn't mean to." Sect clicked its mandibles in amusement. "Perhaps that is why it worked." They stood in companionable silence for a moment, the harsh world of Volthar stretching out before them. "You ever think about what's next?" Jackson asked, breaking the quiet. Sect glanced at him. "What do you mean?" "I mean, we've come this far. Humans and Volthar working together. What's the next step?" Sect considered this. "Perhaps the stars." Together, Jackson grinned. "Now that's something I'd like to see." Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like the video and hit subscribe for more exciting content. Make sure to turn on the notification bell so you never miss an update.